Hey everyone, and welcome to the MMQB TV. I'm Albert Breer. With me today from the Dan Patrick Show and the host of the Against the Grain podcast, Andrew Perloff. Bart Scott has the week off. So Andrew, we're going to get right into it. The big news from last weekend will be the big news from this weekend, as Antonio Brown is expected to make his debut for the New England Patriots in Miami against the Dolphins. We all expected the defending champion Patriots to be Super Bowl contenders again in 2019. But where do you put New England now if you didn't already have them on top after the addition of Brown?
You nailed it. I have them exactly where they were a week ago. They're on top. The thing about it is, that really actually worries me, is they looked so good against Pittsburgh. The receiving core, we were so worried about. Dorsett looked amazing, running by defenders. Josh Gordon looks great. Of course, Edelman is Edelman. So if anything, it's not, I don't look at this acquisition and say, wow, they're going to be so much better. My first worry is, wow, are there going to be enough touches for Antonio Brown? Yeah. And are they going to have to put some productive players and some promising players on the bench?
So let me tell you why I think that they can do this. They can do this not because of the risks they've taken in the past that have worked, and there have been a lot of them.
Yep.
They can do it because of the risks that haven't worked, right? So if you look in their past, right, 2010, the Moss thing goes the wrong way. There's a locker room confrontation at halftime with a coach. He's traded the next day. That would rip a lot of teams apart, right? Trading him to the Vikings. What happened? They wind up 14-2. The next year, they trade for Chad Johnson and Albert Haynesworth on the same day that summer. Haynesworth doesn't make it to November. Chad Johnson has like 15 catches. They wind up 13-3 in the Super Bowl. So even if this doesn't work out, chances are they're going to be able to absorb the damage, whatever the damage is, right? There are reasons to believe it won't work. All right, number one, this is a guy who's always played by his own rules, right? And we've heard him say that a bunch. Number two, if you talk to people in the Steelers organization, what they will tell you, not a precise route runner, not always where he needs to be, freelances a bunch. And what's Tom Brady's history? Receivers like that don't work there. Joey Galloway was that way. It didn't work for him there. Early in his career, Ben Watson, who's as smart as maybe any player in the NFL, had trouble catching on, had trouble getting to the right spots when he was supposed to be there. It was tough for Watson as a young player. And so I wonder if that part of it's going to be an issue too. A guy who's so used to freelancing and sort of doing his own thing, playing with this quarterback who's maniacal about his guys being in the right places.
You know, everyone says Bill Belichick, if it doesn't work out, he'll just cut him, because there's a history of that. But even Chad Ochocinco or Albert Haynesworth, Antonio Brown has taken everything to a new level. I mean, everything he did over the last month, we've never seen that even from the history of diva wide receivers of the NFL, we've never seen that. So I do wonder if he doesn't get his touches or if something happens. Everyone just assumes they can absorb this. But my question, Albert, did they need to take this on? I know they wanted him in March, but as of early September, did they need this?
And I don't so I would have told you a month and a half ago, I would have said receiver is a huge need for them. They need to find help there. And you saw guys like Jacoby Myers and Gunnar Olszewski come along in camp, and you're like, okay, is this guy going to play this role? Is that guy going to play that role? And then Josh Gordon gets reinstated, and Edelman gets healthy, and Philip Dorsett looks like he's got a little something. And what I observed on Sunday night was a complete team. So I really, just the way they methodically took that Steelers team apart, and that's a good Steelers team. I still think that Steelers team has a very legitimate shot to win their division. And it didn't feel like they had a chance. From the first snap, it didn't feel like they had a chance. So I don't think they need him. And also, but he's the best receiver in the league when he's right.
So what happens when Tom Brady's spraying the ball to James White, and then he gets all those receivers you just mentioned? He finds a tight end, and Antonio Brown gets 5 targets in a game. Is Brown going to buy in to the Patriot way?
You got to be okay. You got to be okay with that. That's the thing about that offense is there are going to be weeks where he'll have 11 catches, no doubt. That'll happen.
Yeah.
And then there are going to be other weeks where he's going to have 2 catches, and and is that going to be a problem? And you think about how did things blow up in Pittsburgh? They blew up because he didn't win the team MVP award. Why is he out? Why did he choose now to blow up in Pittsburgh? Why did he choose last week to blow up in Oakland? Well, he blew up in Pittsburgh right when the guaranteed money was up. He blew up in Oakland right when they tried to avoid his guaranteed money, right? And so you think about the situation they're in right now. Well, he could get a boatload more guaranteed money in March.
Yep.
And some of that's going to be tied to his production. Yeah. And so there's that part of it too, which is are you going to be okay, dude, if you wind up with 60 or 70 catches instead of 110? I think they're fair questions to ask.
Right, and if you're going to look at any spot where Antonio Brown can make it and buy into a program and buy into a quarterback, it's got to be New England. I would have told you, any other team but New England, I would have said bad idea.
Yeah.
All 30 teams, 29 teams.
You know why it is?
Yeah.
You know why it is? It's because, like, look what happened to the Steelers when he blew up. Look what happened to the Raiders. Like, I don't know that there's any other team that can withstand the fallout of something like this if it goes the wrong way, like the Patriots can, right?
Well, Seattle was the other team that people talked about with Pete Carroll, but they're not as good as the Patriots. So, no, I think it was the perfect marriage. Did they tamper? That's a whole different story. I'm sure you have some strong thoughts on that. I expect it to work. Do you expect him to play 16 or 15 more games?
I think it'll work. Yeah. I think ultimately, you know why? And here's a one I think important point here. One thing I was told during, over the course of the last couple of months, they're going through the Josh Gordon thing, and when the Browns traded him to New England, basically part of it was Bill going to Tom and saying, this has got to be on you, dude. Like, you got to help. Mm-hmm. And that's why Gordon sort of started to pop up on Brady's social media and all that different stuff, even during the suspension, right? So I would expect that maybe the same thing happens here. And if Belichick does put it on Brady, that's a little different. Like, screwing over Mike Tomlin, screwing over John Gruden is a little different than screwing over one of your peers, right? Yeah. So maybe that's a subtle difference where Antonio Brown won't want to disappoint, and forget Belichick, won't want to disappoint Tom Brady.
Yeah. Did you know the offensive line was going to be that good?
No. I've learned one thing in 15 years covering the NFL. Do not doubt Dante Scarnecchia.
Oh.
He will figure it out. Whatever Dante Scarnecchia is getting paid is not enough. Okay, we're going to move on now. And there's another Brown that we'll all have our eyes on early this season. That's the Cleveland Browns. The much-typed Browns got trounced at home by the largely ignored Tennessee Titans in Week 1. Now in Week 2, the Browns head to New York to take on the Jets, who clearly have their own issues on Monday night. Andrew, what was your takeaway after the Browns' Week 1 loss, and what do you expect them to do in Week 2 in a game where there's a lot of pressure on both teams?
So I think my biggest concern coming in, I knew about all the talent, but do you need a veteran coach to corral all the egos in that locker room? Freddie Kitchens, I had some questions about. Obviously, great play caller, no doubt. But you need somebody who can manage personalities. And what we saw on Sunday was a total lack of discipline. 18 penalties. Greg Robinson with the kick. Myles Garrett lost a little bit. I'm very concerned. I think they bounce back against the Jets. I know we'll break that game down later. They're obviously talented. But big picture, like, the worst fears about the Browns came true on Sunday for me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of the fears for me was the offensive line.
And that's
I mean, that's the thing is I think it's always troublesome when you have and every summer we do this with every team, positive and negative, and for contenders, and we're expecting them to be a contender. What could take this contender down? Well, it's always a little scary when the things you have in that category, right? Like, what could take the contender down, all sort of manifest at once. Yeah. And I feel like that happened in Week 1. You mentioned the penalties. 18 penalties, 3 turnovers, right? And then what was the one trouble spot we all thought that they had coming into the year?
The O-line.
The O-line. And what happened with the O-line? The O-line looked like a train wreck against the Tennessee Titans. And so, I think John Dorsey has to do something to try to find some help on the outside, which can be difficult to do, okay? And then beyond that, like, I've got depth questions there too. Like, if they have another injury in a bad spot, maybe they got another trouble area. And then there's the management of the whole situation, which I think Freddie Kitchens is up to the task, but we have to remember he's a projection because he hasn't done it before. And when John Dorsey was taking these sorts of risks in the past, he was handing players who had issues to Andy Reid, who's been a head coach in the NFL for decades, right?
Great at that.
It's a little different when you're handing those sorts of risks over to a first-year head coach.
And Baker Mayfield, in the fourth quarter, you saw him trying to make a play, trying to do too much. Is this the Baker Mayfield that we should get used to, or are we going to see the second half of last year, Baker Mayfield?
I think it's incumbent on the Browns coaches now to maybe go to him and say, calm down.
Yeah.
We want you to play your game. We're going to manage the offensive line issue. We just need you to go out there and play quarterback. Because this is a guy who he's always been able to take over.
Right.
And maybe you got to kind of teach him, like, you don't have to take over every single time. Okay. One team who was anything but a bust in Week 1, the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys demolished the New York Giants behind the play of Dak Prescott. And now we all know Jerry Jones will pony up and pay Dak. Right, Andrew?
Oh, big time.
Are you sold on Dak? being a top-tier quarterback.
Well, I often am called the system QB guy on the Dan Patrick Show.
Yep.
The system is great for him.
Yeah.
Kellen Moore was such an upgrade.
Yep.
It feels like a modern passing offense, like a Sean McVay, Andy Reid offense. So we'll start with that. You put that offensive line. You have all of a sudden a deep receiving core. Michael Gallup, I think, has taken a big step up. He looked great in his second year, and Amari Cooper looked great again. I think all the pieces around Dak are there for him to be elite. So I don't know if that answers your question. I think he's going to get paid, if not the most of any quarterback in history, close to it. And I think this is a great setup for success here.
And I think like the quarterback market kind of crystallized, right? Because we went from, it was at all times, the highest paid quarterback was the last paid quarterback.
Yeah.
So it went from Andrew Luck to Derek Carr to Matthew Stafford to Jimmy Garoppolo to Kirk Cousins to Matt Ryan to Aaron Rodgers to Russell Wilson.
Wow,
right?
that was impressive.
So, but Russell Wilson becomes the highest paid. Now Carson Wentz comes in under him. Now Jared Goff comes in under him. And so I think there is like sort of a stabilization of the market. They want to get him done before Patrick Mahomes gets his deal. And I'm with you. Yeah. Like one thing if you talk to Cowboys people the last 3 or 4 months, there was this quiet optimism about Kellen Moore and what he was going to be able to do and how he was going to be good for Dak. And one thing that somebody there pointed out to me, he had 4 touchdown passes on Sunday. 3 of them came off of play action on first or second down.
Yeah.
What does that tell you? That tells you Kellen Moore is marrying the run game to the passing game. Even better, Zeke Elliott wasn't a full-time player yet on Sunday. He only had 12 carries. And so, the run game isn't really where it's going to be yet. And so you've got, this offense that I think is really built on the things that Dak Prescott's done well since he was at Mississippi State, and you're going to have a run game that's going to juice it further.
But I couldn't help but think, they just paid Ezekiel Elliott all that money. Was that a misallocation of funds? I'm like, if they could pass why are they paying a running back $90 million?
Listen, it's really a 4-year deal.
Okay.
$50 million over 4. It's $12 million per.
Yeah.
That's $10 million less.
You're right.
Than Julio Jones.
You're right. And you said play action, and obviously Ezekiel is still a big part, even if he doesn't.
No question. Okay, now we're going to go back to the New England Patriots and the Antonio Brown saga. Here's our own Ryan Aselta with the sports director of ABC 6 in Providence, Nick Coit.
All right, thanks, guys. Week 1 of the new NFL season showed the rich getting much richer. Of course, by rich, I mean the Super Bowl champion Patriots, who, prior to dismantling the Steelers on Sunday night, added the latest chapter to the Antonio Brown soap opera by signing the All-Pro wide receiver. For more on the Patriots, we welcome in ABC Providence sports director Nick Coit. Nick, let's start with Antonio Brown, who was signed with the Patriots on Saturday. You're around this team quite a bit here. How was the news of Brown's signing received by the players in the Pats locker room?
Well, usually we get a very peppy and excited, and Bill Belichick is so transparent with these sorts of things. Not really. Obviously, Bill Belichick, again, sort of scoffing at the question on Sunday, shutting it down a couple times. But the players, they were receptive to it. And right away on Instagram, too, you saw Julian Edelman hopped on there on Saturday, and already he was commenting, and Tom Brady was leaving hearts on Instagram for him. And, we heard on the NBC broadcast that he even offered up a room in the house in the mansion in Brookline and said, hey, come stay with me while you're looking for a place. I think these players are receptive to the kind of talent that Antonio Brown is. Even with everything that happened in Oakland, Ryan, I think that, this team, the more talent you have, the better. And I think that was sort of the feeling around the locker room after the game.
You mentioned the talent, no doubting AB's talent, but let's face it, Brown has been disruptive for his last 2 teams, the Steelers and, of course, the Raiders. Any concern in New England that Brown could disrupt what is already a Super Bowl caliber roster?
I don't think so, Ryan. I think this is a culture that's been established, and I think at this point, as you mentioned, AB has sort of been a disruption in 2 locker rooms here, and now with this Patriots team, he's coming into a team that we saw. It was a dismantling of the Steelers in Sunday Night Football, and it's like, well, who needs who more? And I think Antonio Brown at this point with what he's done needs the Patriots more than the Patriots need him, and so I think that's the kind of situation that could be a good thing here if Brown comes in and improves himself and, integrates himself into this system and, is able to sort of sacrifice himself a little bit for this team, then it'll work. If not, I think Belichick will show him the door, and, it'll be a quick marriage, and it'll be over before he even knew what hit him. So I think this is the perfect kind of culture for him to come into here because, again, I don't think he can be that much of a disruption because this team is already very good.
How about on the field, Nick? The Patriots were very successful Sunday night with Josh Gordon, Julian Edelman, and Philip Dorsett on Sunday Night Football. The three combined for over 250 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns. How do you expect Brown to fit in offensively with this group?
Yeah, it's an interesting question but I think he can do everything. I mean, we've seen that, and I think the players were talking about this after the game, whoever did comment, the fact that Antonio Brown can run every kind of run you want. And we've seen with Josh McDaniels, he'll use him in many different ways. If he gets a weapon, he'll put him out there. I kept looking at the running backs in the game on Sunday and saying, like, wow, look at the 2 wide receivers that are out wide. Out on the left, it was Rex Burkhead. Out on the right, it was James White. It's like McDaniels isn't afraid to get creative here. So with a guy like Antonio Brown, they'll use him in a number of different ways, I'm sure. And will it help? Will it be something different for some of the other guys that are already on the team? Probably. It's probably going to open things up more for a guy like Josh Gordon. If you look at Josh Gordon with Antonio Brown and Julian Edelman in the receiving corps, he might be option number 3. That's scary. If Josh Gordon's on the field and he's your option number 3 going up against a third corner from another team, wow! I just can't. I can't imagine how to game plan against an offense like this when you put all those guys in the field at the same time. It's incredible to think about, Ryan.
Yeah, we saw the result without AB, 33-3 on Sunday night. I know Bill Belichick keeps his teams grounded, but with the blowout win, the addition of Antonio Brown coming on the horizon, how would you describe the mood in Gillette Stadium, in that locker room, late Sunday night for those players?
Surprisingly, I think it was very businesslike. It was sort of business as usual. I think they saw the banner raised, and I think last time they had a banner raising in Foxborough, they got beat up by the Kansas City Chiefs. This was a couple of years ago, and so I think some of these players were around for that. They learned from it, and I think they went out there, they took care of their business, and they said, okay, we're on to the next game. And, a few guys talked about the addition of Antonio Brown, and then that was it. They're moving on. It's on to Miami. That's how it always is with the Patriots. There's no celebrating a win like this because it's only one win, and it's week 1. And as Tom Brady said, it's a long marathon, and it's just getting started.
Yeah, you mentioned Brady, 42 years old. He opens up his 20th season with 341 yards, 3 touchdowns. Nick, has Brady given any sense as to how long he thinks he can keep this up?
I don't know, Ryan. It's with the whole contract situation. That was a really interesting thing to go through in camp, and the fact that they signed him to an extension but didn't really extend his contract because it can be voided. And so it's tough to say, but I think he's been pretty consistent with the statement that he wants to play until he's 45. And so to think that this would be the last year for him, I wouldn't think so, because he's still at the top of his game too. I think it took him about a drive in the game against the Steelers to get going. And once he did, I mean, that first touchdown throw to Philip Dorsett, I thought was a beauty. He's still seeing the field and reading the defense the way he always has. He said a couple of years ago, he sort of got all the answers to the test. It's really tough to fool Tom Brady. And as long as he's still got the talent to go out there and be a good quarterback for this team, he's going to go out there and do it. And so I think it was the usual Tom Brady, even at 42 years old on Sunday.
Yeah, and he gets a new weapon, a new toy for that offense, just in time for the mighty Dolphins this coming week in Week 2. Nick Coyd of ABC 6 in Providence. Nick, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. Great to talk to you, man.
All right, let's send it back over to Albert and the guys.
And now it's time for everybody's favorite segment. That's Andrew Perloff's 3-step drop. Andrew, take it away.
All right, we're going to call this segment Gold or Fool's Gold. So we'll basically look at what's an overreaction from Week 1. Let's start with the Baltimore Ravens, and you wrote about Lamar Jackson, Monday morning quarterback. 5 touchdowns. That's going to be his career. It's going to be his season best. It's going nowhere but down. But you cannot. How many perfect rating games can you have? It was an unbelievable performance Week 1. He's probably going to be good against Arizona. Now, I think he's good, but I do not think the hype that we're seeing this week is accurate. Defenses are going to adjust to some extent. I do agree that he's taken a major step from last year, but what I'm hearing this week is, Lamar Jackson is fully developed. No, He's in his second year. I expect that to come back down a little bit, although I was as impressed as everyone else.
I mean, I was impressed, and I guess I'm contributing to all the hysteria out there.
You are.
I mean, and look, I think that there are some things that are sustainable that he did, in particular the quarterback things. And I think the fact that they didn't go out there and run some crazy offense to try and fool everybody and game it up so Lamar could throw is a positive development. The fact that he's going out there and it was real quarterback development, like his touchdown passes were a matter of him seeing coverage and finding matchups. That's great.
Yeah.
So I think that they're headed in the right direction with the quarterback. I still think it's fool's gold for two reasons. One, they're just replacing so much on defense, and I like Earl Thomas there, but Eric Weddle was such an important piece, and they lose C.J. Mosley at linebacker, and they lose Terrell Suggs up front. That's a lot of institutional knowledge of what the Ravens do, of how the Ravens do it, and so I think that eventually that's going to hit them. And look how young they are around Lamar. It's not just Lamar's development; it's relying on Antonio. I guess we have to put Antonio Brown in every segment.
So he's his cousin, but
yeah. Hollywood Brown. I mean, it's Hollywood Brown, Miles Boykin, another rookie, Mark Andrews, second-year tight end,
who's great, by the way.
Yeah, who look great. But they're so young, and so I just think that there's going to be some ups and downs for them. And again, based on the division they play in, Cleveland gets their crap together, Steelers get their crap together, and the Bengals look better. And I know you love that. The Bengals look better than they have the last couple of years in Week 1. And so I just think it's going to be – I think we're going to see flashes of this, but I don't think it's going to be consistent.
Well, we've talked a lot about this Baltimore defense. I call them the liquid Terminator defense because they always reform. And I know the injuries definitely hurt, but I think they're going to be okay. I wonder, I still think back to the Chargers game last year in the playoffs where the Chargers had 5 defensive backs. The Dolphins were so bad that I have to throw it out the door. And I'm not expecting anything out of the Cardinals. How will good defenses scheme up against Lamar Jackson? The fact that he didn't run, which you mentioned, is kind of scary.
I mean, 3 rushes.
Yeah.
3 rushes. And, and I do think, so I think what's unsustainable is what they were doing last year. I don't think you're going to be able to run Lamar Jackson 15 times a game based on his frame, based on what any quarterback would be facing in the NFL. I think it'd be tough for him to hold up. I do think the play action stuff's sustainable. I do think the way that they're able to hold defenses, the way they're able to dictate coverage because Lamar can use his wheels, that is sustainable.
Gives you an extra offensive player because you got to watch Lamar.
Right, and so I think that there's a piece of this that's very, very sustainable. And again, look, I think there are going to be some bumps, and the goal of every defensive coordinator, get him in long yardage and force him to be a drop-back passer. And that's something that we really haven't seen yet. We haven't seen him be consistent as a drop-back passer. So I think he's taken steps. I think the question becomes, how does he play when they're from way behind? We saw a little bit of it in the playoffs. How does he play when they're in 3rd and 10 a bunch in a game? I think that's the next step in his
Remember, I think the Ravens beat the Bills something like 47-3 the Week 1 last year and came down to earth, so we won't get too excited. Okay, Tennessee Titans blow out the Cleveland Browns. Gold or fool's gold? I just want to point out that game was really close to the end of the 3rd quarter.
Yeah.
And it was not exactly a stellar performance throughout from the Titans.
Okay, I'm going to give you I guess we have to say fool's gold because they won by 30. But I mean, I do think that there's a piece of this that is real.
Yeah.
And one thing that I always try to do before the year and looking at who I think could be a surprise contender, who's really strong along the lines of scrimmage, right?
Yeah.
This is a Titans team. I mean, they won without Taylor Lewan. And one of the best left tackles in football. So they'll get him back in 3 weeks. And so, I think their offensive line, when Lewan comes back, becomes a real strength and is already pretty good even without him. And then the defensive line, and you think about how they've stocked up there, drafting Harold Landry, bringing in Cam Wake. They've got, it feels like they've got strengths along the lines of scrimmage. So at the very least, to me, that means you're going to be competitive week to week. That means you're not going to get blown out of the building very much, And so I think a lot of this is going to come down to the obvious thing, which is how Marcus Mariota plays.
Well, before, I think last week we were talking about, does Mariota last the whole season? There's a Vegas over-under on it. What did you see from him in Week 1? Did you see enough to get excited, or did you see the inconsistent player? Because I saw some of that.
Yeah, I think you still saw the inconsistent player. And I also think it's a different context when you're playing from ahead like that, when you're able to run the ball the way they were able to run the ball. A bunch of his yards came on the short little pop to Derrick Henry, who goes a long way with it. It's just there was some smoke and mirrors there, and I still need to see more to be sold that Mariota is going to have the kind of year that the Titans had hoped he would have when they drafted him that high 5 years ago.
Okay, last team, San Francisco 49ers. And they beat a pretty bad, what we think will be a bad Bucs team. So I'm not sure that anyone thinks they're gold. But I'm really concerned. Do you have that win as gold or fool's gold?
You're concerned about what, Jimmy?
Jimmy G, yeah. I mean, like 6.1 yards per attempt, which for him is way down. You know, all offseason we kept hearing Jimmy G doesn't look good in practice.
Yeah.
And I thought he might be a gamer in week one, and but it looked like the concerning Jimmy G.
Yeah, the defense. So I'll start with the defense because I think that there's a chance the defense is really good. Because of what they have up front. And like adding D Ford and Nick Bosa to what they already had and all those interior guys that they drafted high, Eric Armstead and Solomon Thomas, and of course DeForest Buckner. Like they've got a chance to be up to deal with that pass rush. And that's why they have the 2 pick sixes to make up the difference in that game. So I think the defense has a chance to be really good. To me, offensively, I just have a lot of faith in Kyle Shanahan that he's gonna find a way to figure this out. And I think a lot of what they've done and a lot of what they did over the summer was trying to challenge Jimmy. And one thing that Kyle said to me was he just hasn't played a lot, and that's a problem for us. And so I think he was trying to accelerate his experience by putting him through some of those things. Now the risk is when you do something like that is you maybe affect his confidence. So that's where my concern would be. Like, where's his confidence at coming out of week one? But I do have a lot of faith that Kyle Shanahan as a coach is going to be able to figure it out, and they've got a lot of talent on the defensive side.
Well, right, but they're more concerning maybe is Jimmy's weapons are not great. I mean, if you take George Kittle out of that offense, they don't seem to love Matt Breida. I'd play him every play. And Tevin Coleman hurt. That, I think, is, who's
they just need the development of the young receivers.
Yeah, that's a lot to count on.
And that's the thing is like it's going to be the development of the young receivers.
But in general, should we buy into week one, or are you a guy that says it's
I just don't like. I like. There's so much like to me like week one. There's so much of week one is you've been planning for 6 months, and I'm going to pull this out of my bag, and I'm going to pull this out of my bag, and they've never seen this before, and I think we've seen it so many times where there's week 1 to week 2 regression. And, like there have been times where what we've seen in week 1's been real. I think the Rams were a team, I believe in Sean McVay's first game, they looked really good. And I can't remember who it was against, but they came out and they looked really good right out of the gate. And you were sort of like, all right, well, let's see if this is just, Sean coming up with a couple different things. And, then everybody catches up to them and they regress. And they hadn't been good in forever. And it wound up being real. Right. Chip Kelly in Philadelphia, everybody remembers that. Like week 1 on that Monday night game against the Redskins, that was it was bananas seeing the way that they were able to just run roughshod over the Redskins in that game. And that wound up being sustainable for a couple of years. So I think that I think it's not fake. We just don't know if it's real.
Right, and well, a lot of guys sat this preseason. That seems to be a trend too. There are a lot of players who hadn't played together who saw each other for the first time this week.
And to me, that piece of it's interesting too, because that piece of it, because of the CBA, because they went from 15 weeks to 10 weeks of the off-season program, because they don't have two-a-days anymore during training camp, they lose so much time there, right? And I do think that there's this element. Different coaches approach the first month differently. The Patriots have been bad. The first month, by their standards, bad over the last 3 or 4 years, right? Well, that's because they treat the first month of the season as an extended preseason, trying to figure out who they are and everything else. And some teams just throw it all out on the table and look really good. So it's just sort of, I think part of it depends on your approach. I think every team's approach under the new CBA is just a little bit different. Thank you, Andrew. 3-step drop, excellent as always. And now we're going to take a little break from football reality and take a look into the world of fantasy football. Here's Sports Illustrated's fantasy expert, Bill Enright, with Week 2's Stardom Sit 'em.
Hey everyone, this is Sports Illustrated's Bill Enright here with your fantasy football start and sit for week number 2. I'll start off with a general one, and usually I don't have to remind people to play their studs on their fantasy football roster, but when I talk about the New England Patriots, I am starting everyone and anyone on this team against the Miami Dolphins defense that just gave up 59 points to the Baltimore Ravens. Josh Gordon, Julian Edelman, Antonio Brown, all of the running backs, Sony Michel, James White, Rex Burkhead. I might even throw in a little fullback action with James Devlin because that's how bad this Miami defense really is. A couple of other running backs that should be in all lineups this weekend. Matt Breida, who is now taking over in that lineup for the San Francisco 49ers with Tevin Coleman sidelined with a high ankle sprain. Chris Carson ran all over the Cincinnati Bengals in week 1 for 81 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's Breida's matchup in week number 2. Kerryon Johnson's playing against the Chargers. They just got destroyed by Marlon Mack on the ground, who ran for 174 yards and a touchdown. So make sure that you put in Kerryon Johnson in your lineups. Even though he had a rough game against the Arizona Cardinals, I expect a bounce back one for Johnson in week number 2. Another running back is a rookie, Buffalo Bills' Devin Singletary, who's going to be the guy in that Buffalo backfield. He tied Cole Beasley for the most catches on the team, and he also ran for 70 yards in week 1 against the Jets. Now, the Giants have an atrocious defense, so be sure to start the rookie from Buffalo in your running back spot. How about a rookie wide receiver? This one is Mecole Hardman of the Kansas City Chiefs. Unfortunately, Tyreek Hill's going to be out for a while. So Mecole Hardman is not only going to be a very hot commodity on the waiver wire, but he should be a hot commodity in your starting lineup for week number 2. How about another wide receiver that is making a big splash in week 1? That's Tyrell Williams of the Oakland Raiders, who really did a good job of filling in even with that Antonio Brown on the roster. DJ Chark, Dede Westbrook, both exposed the Kansas City Chiefs secondary, and that's exactly who Tyrell Williams is going up against in week number 2. I'm talking about another Buffalo Bill. I can't believe it, but the Giants are just that bad. Put John Brown in your lineups. New York secondary got burned by wide receiver Michael Gallup of the Dallas Cowboys for 158 yards on 7 catches. Brown is exactly the type of receiver that will burn that Giants secondary. Another speedy receiver I like is Deshaun Jackson, who's going up against the Falcons. It is very clear that D-Jax and Carson Wentz have a lot of chemistry. 10 targets, 154 yards, 2 touchdowns for Deshaun in week number 1. Expect a very good stat line in week number 2. And then finally, in that same matchup, it's Calvin Ridley, the second-year wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons, going up against that Philadelphia Eagles secondary that was burned by not exactly the best wide receivers in Terry McLaurin and Trey Quinn. So put Calvin Ridley in your lineups. And then one tight end for you. How about Oakland Raiders tight end Darren Waller, who caught 7 passes for 70 yards on Monday Night Football. Waller looks like one of Derek Carr's favorite targets. All right, let's move over to the guys that you don't want in your lineups. These are the sit-ems, and I'm going with a quarterback, the number 1 overall pick in the 2019 NFL Draft. That is Kyler Murray. I'm a little bit concerned about Murray this week and really that whole Arizona Cardinals offense, and it's because they're going up against that ferocious Baltimore Ravens defense that demolished the Miami Dolphins in week 1. It's one thing that Murray had a good comeback or a good second half against a Detroit Lions team, but no way is he going to replicate that kind of action against a Baltimore Ravens defense. I'm not going to bash Murray yet. I'm just not going to anoint him as my weekly quarterback starter in fantasy. 2 running backs I got for you, and they're on the same team. Phillip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. Chicago Bears just gave up 39 yards to Aaron Jones, and this is a 50-50 split. Lindsay had 11 carries. Royce Freeman had 10. There doesn't seem like there's a lead back in either situation. 50-50 split. Going up against a bad defense, you're going to want to leave both of the Denver Broncos running backs on your bench this week. One more running back for you, Kenyon Drake against the Patriots. How much is Miami really going to be able to score or run the ball if they're down 3 or 4 touchdowns heading into halftime against the New England Patriots? I'm just not using any of my Miami Dolphins players in week number 2. How about some wide receivers? We've got Dede Westbrook and DJ Chark. Now, I know they both scored touchdowns against the Chiefs, but this week it's Gardner Minshew, the 6th-round rookie for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'd rather use another wide receiver than roll the dice with either Westbrook or DJ Chark with the rookie Minshew at the quarterback spot. So hold off on using your Jaguars this week. I know what we saw out of Minshew. The first week was decent, but I'm just not using them in week number 2 with that matchup. And that'll do it for your start and sit for week number 2.
All right, Andrew, let's get into our way too early picks that we will not be held to. And this year, we are all in on the gambling tilt as we are picking against the spread. Unfortunately, Bart won last week going 3-1. Andrew and I both split our week going 2-2. Bart's not here, so we're giving him all the underdogs. We're going to get to it. Let's start on Thursday night in Carolina, where the Panthers are giving 6.5 to the Buccaneers. Andrew, who you got?
Okay, from a football standpoint, I feel confident in the Panthers. I think Cam Newton looked rusty last week. He's just going to get better. McCaffrey was awesome. From a betting standpoint, I'm really nervous. I expect a really low-scoring game, which means it's going to be tough for the Panthers to get to that 6.5, but I just wasn't impressed with the Bucs. I think the Panthers win because it's at home But again, I'd pound the under too here.
I'm with you. I think that the Panthers are able to build on what they did late in that game against the Rams. And what I'm really banking on here is we see a little bit more from the offense than we did. Cam looked okay. The young receivers looked okay, and I think they're expecting big things, have been expecting big things from DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel. Maybe those guys get their sea legs. They're able to rely a little bit more on those guys and take the load off of Christian McCaffrey, who had a lot on him in week 1. I mean, I had heard that they were going to manage him a little bit in short yardage and the goal line. They did not manage him at all in week 1.
They can't help themselves with him. He's not going to last, but he is on that rookie contract.
Yeah, there's no question that 4 days rest, you might want to just take it a little easier on Christian McCaffrey, maybe manage him a little bit differently. Okay, next up on Sunday night, the Falcons are getting 1 as they host the Eagles. Andrew, really small spread here. Who do you like in Atlanta?
Okay, I think the key matchup here is the Eagles' defensive line, which used to be a big strength, but now they don't have Chris Long, they don't have Michael Bennett. They had trouble getting the Redskins. After the game in the locker room, they said, listen, we didn't really play together in the preseason. We're all getting used to it. We're going to get better. You know what? This is a great opportunity against Atlanta, but I think if they give Matt Ryan anywhere near the time they gave Case Keenum, I think Matt Ryan's going to bounce back. It's a desperate game for Atlanta. You're already hearing Dan Quinn on the hot seat. Yep. I really feel like at home there's an energy there that will carry Atlanta.
Well, and there's an injury for the Eagles on their defensive line too, Malik Jackson, and that could affect the pass rush. Maybe make it a little easier for Atlanta to deal with another team's defensive front than they had last week against Minnesota. But I've got issues with that Atlanta offensive line now. It was a problem last year, and one of the things that they did, they went to the owner. Like Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitroff went to the owner and said, we're going to fix this, because they felt like to get the most out of Matt Ryan, they needed to be really strong up front. And based on the investment, the model they're going for is like what the Cowboys did 5 years ago, right? Caleb McGarry in the first round, Chris Lidstrom in the first round. Well, Caleb McGarry missed a lot of training camp. Chris Lidstrom at right guard is now out until Thanksgiving with a broken bone in his foot. And I don't know, like watching the way Matt Ryan kind of got beat up early in that Minnesota game, seeing an aggressive defensive coordinator in Jim Schwartz on the other side. I believe in the Eagles' depth on defense. I think they're going to be able to sustain through the loss of Malik Jackson. To me, that Eagles team, the ceiling is still really, really high for them. And based on the way they finished against the Redskins, right? Didn't start great, but based on the way they finished against the Redskins, I think there's reason to believe that they could go and look pretty impressive at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
But I think if you're going to get Philly, you got to get them early in the season. Before they're full strength. I think that's Atlanta's chance.
No question. Okay, next up on Monday night, the Jets host the Browns. New York is getting 2.5. Who are you taking?
Oh my gosh. I mean, both teams looked terrible last week.
Yep.
So the question is, who bounces back? I just think the better team is Cleveland. Now, the only concern I have is Greg Williams, the defensive coordinator with the Jets facing his old team, might get his defense fired up, but the Jets really just did nothing to inspire me. Where Cleveland, I think, played well below their talent level. I just got to go with the better team here.
And I'm thinking the Browns too. I mean, I look at the Jets' issues, offensive line, corner.
Yeah.
Those are issues you can exploit if you're the Browns. And look, the Jets have, or the Browns have an offensive line issue as well. But I just think that the Browns are built in a way where they can take advantage with their defensive front, with their receivers, of the Jets' biggest weaknesses. You know what's so interesting about this one, though, is both these teams have bad starts to the season.
Yeah.
The Browns get blown out, lose by 30 at home. The Jets blow a double-digit lead to a division opponent at home. And, like, these teams for the next 6 days are going to have to hear about how the sky is falling. And then, and you know the way the Monday night game works. Like on Monday night, you're in that standalone game, and there's all the build-up during the day. There's pressure on both of these teams because a loss in this spot, not good. The Browns because of the expectations. The Jets, because over the next 4 weeks, they play the Patriots twice, they play the Cowboys, and they play the Eagles.
Yeah.
So going 0-2 here for the Jets could wind up meaning 0-6 a month from now.
Yeah, similar. The Browns have some tough games, all national games too. I was more disappointed in Sam Darnold in the offense than I think any unit. I was ready to buy in. I was totally in Le'Veon Bell. The thing about the Jets though, if Le'Veon Bell gets fired up for a primetime game, where on the other hand with the Browns, if Odell Beckham Jr. gets fired up and has a big game, I feel like New York, maybe OBJ. Do you buy into OBJ maybe having a breakout?
I mean, I could see him turn it. I mean, like just logically, from a human standpoint, this one means more to him, right?
Oh,
like just being back in his old stadium. I know it's not the Giants on the other sideline, but being back in his old stadium, I think would mean something to him. And the Jets have that deficiency at corner. Like that deficiency at corner shows up when you play against guys like Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham. And so I think the Browns are going to come back, and I think they're going to look pretty impressive. Right. Too. I think what you're going to see is sort of the Freddie Kitchens response. Like Freddie Kitchens, I think, and his staff are going to get after their guys a little bit. And I think you're probably going to see a little attitude from the Browns this week.
Right, but they can't have those penalties, and I think they will. I mean,
or the kicking people in the helmet, or the punching people. Yeah,
bad idea.
Yeah, you can't have that. Okay, before we get out of here, give me one line that you love in week 2.
Okay, this is the most controversial line of the week. It's huge. I know this. And after last week, it makes no sense. I like the Dolphins getting 18 points. I know, 18 points. You open at 14.5. As of today, it's up to 18 in some books against the Patriots. Okay, we know Tom Brady's not good in Miami. 5 of 6 losses. We know it's a divisional game. We know the Dolphins were thoroughly embarrassed and maybe calling their agents, say, get me out of here. So everything is pointing to the Dolphins shock the world and make this close. Also, remember, Belichick gave his buddies Matt Patricia and Mike Vrabel wins last year. Maybe Brian Flores knows the team. I'm not saying they win, but isn't everything saying that this game is going to be closer than we think? Because we all think it's going to be a crazy blowout.
Yeah, the Patriots don't play well in Miami.
They don't.
It's just the roster's so bad. I don't know. Okay, I'm going to give you the Vikings.
Okay.
Going into Green Bay, getting 2.5. I just think the Vikings. Maybe this is because they were my Super Bowl pick last year, and I still want to hang on to the idea that I was right and just a couple of things went wrong. But to be able to run the ball the way that they did, and to be able to do that behind an offensive line that was a liability last year, and they needed to get fixed, and having new pieces in there like Garrett Bradbury and having Rick Dennison and Gary Kubiak as part of the whole deal there. If they're able to play offense this way, and I'm not saying that the run-pass ratio is going to be the same all year, but if they're able to be effective running the ball, that I think is going to unlock who Kirk Cousins was at his best in Washington. Now you're talking about a totally different offense that has really good weapons on the outside, Thielen and Diggs, and a defense that I think is still a top 5 unit. And so I'm still a little in the Vikings the way that I was last year when I picked them to go to the Super Bowl. And I don't think the Packers are quite as far along as they are right now. And so I like the Vikings to go on the road to cover and to beat the Packers in Green Bay.
So does that mean you weren't buying that Green Bay defensive performance against the Bears? Because that was impressive. You give Aaron Rodgers a top 10 style defense. That's a really good team. Do you think the Vikings, I just worry that maybe that defense shows up again against the Vikings, a divisional game.
It might. It's possible.
Very close.
It's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Dalvin Cook,
2.5. They're getting 2.5, and I just really like the way the Vikings looked. I think the Packers are going to get there. I still think there are some bumps for that offense coming. And look, we've seen the way that the Vikings have knocked around Aaron Rodgers in the past. So.
Yeah, I know. Bad memories.
Well, it's an exciting one, and we got a good slate of games too coming. That'll do it for us for now, though. You can catch us back here next week and every week. For Andrew Perloff, I'm Albert Breer. Enjoy week 2, everyone.